Well, hello everyone. Welcome to our webinar today. My name is Colin Wilson and this is Mo Tremeska, and we are ready to give you one of the greatest webinars for a Monday on the 16th of October. So today's webinar is all about how to protect your business from Workcover claims. So all I'm doing is doing the start and finish of this webinar because I rely so heavily on my trusted consultant next to me, Maya, who's going to take us through the presentation. So let me just get a bit organised. Here we go. All right. So basically what we're going to cover today is understand what creates a Workcover claim, learn how to prevent Workcover claims, in your business, because I think that's a big thing. And then what should you do when you receive a Workcover claim? And Maya, we've certainly seen a big increase of Workcover claims over the last 6 months especially, and that is the reason why we've done this webinar for you today. All right, for those who don't know me, I'm the owner of Key Business Advisors. Love what I do, very passionate about our business, and I do lots of webinars, and occasionally I bring in my wonderful team, which I've got Maya, who's assisting me right now. So Maya, just give us a bit of history about yourself and your background. You've been with us, what, 7 years?
7 years now.
Yeah.
Part of the furniture, or older than some of the furniture that we have here.
Yeah.
Being part of HR from end to end, from anything to do with onboarding to offboarding a staff member and everything else in between, which is similar to and almost the same of what we do. Come from corporate, but love small business, and that's why we're here to help you today.
That's it, and we look after plenty of small businesses at Key Business Advisors all over Australia. Now, what's important is, for us is, our mission is always about taking a business good to great. And that comes from the book Jim Collins, and we're very passionate about, when we go into a business, how do we get to that, help them get to that next level? And it's a win-win scenario. If we help a business get to the next level, they help us get to our next level as well. And our purpose is to take our customers on a journey to help them improve their business through all aspects of employee engagement and performance. And we know if you've got an engaged team, then the performance actually happens. And we have a methodology on how we do that, which is we're all about business strategy and growth, people and culture. We're an outsourced HR business, and Maya, there's a team of 6 people in the HR team, and we do a lot of training, leadership and sales training. So definitely love what we do, and we hope you enjoy this webinar. So we've got 30 odd people who registered for the webinar, and and feel free. Just want to make sure, can you hear us? So if you want to put into the chat box, yes, I can hear you. I should have done that first. That should have been a bit of housekeeping. But if you can hear me and Mayo loud and clear, then please let us know. And perfect. Thank you very much. All right, so Maya, I'm going to head over to you now. So understanding what creates a Workcover claim. So what does create a Workcover claim?
Well, great. We'll get right into it. First, before we do, I want to also mention today's sessions are also a stream through of
being recorded. Yep.
Yeah, not just that, but more about the Workcover claims. They really work through how to minimize the risk of Workcover claims throughout our series of webinars that have also occurred. But before we get into actually understanding it, if you can check in the next slide, Colin, I've got where would you rather work?
Yeah.
Because this paints a great picture of today's session. You've got Organisation A, which talks about working through goals, improve performance, the feedback, recognition, are they aligned? And you can see that wheel with happy people in there.
Yep.
So that's where we want to be if we're not there. And then the other one is Organisation B. So we've got about policy mismatch, disgruntled employees. We've got about not getting enough feedback. One of the biggest things that we see commonly, or the minimal or to no recognition, as well as it's one-sided. I want you to do this, this, and this. I thought this was really important to pop in here, and I love this slide because it does talk about where we actually want to be and think about you as a business here today in our webinar. Where do you actually stand in terms of the business, and where do you want to be? So we all want to be Organisation A, and sometimes we sit at Organisation B for some time, or we do get to Organisation A and then we slip back to Organisation B.
Well, I think that what that is we work with a lot of businesses. I work on the strategy side and the leadership sales side of things, along with my co-partner Scott, and that's all about having strategy, right? So creating that pathway, that direction of where people need to go. And I talk about strategic intent. This
Yes.
is where we want to go. And then what happens is we don't follow the plan, and then strategic drift happens.
Yes.
And then people start creating their own plans within their own organisation, and that's where it can go from organisation A to organisation B.
Yeah, so, and a lot of today is, we might think it's just a HR space and it's just a Workcover claim. It's so far beyond that. So it's really about, how do I continue to stay to be organisation B? Knowing sometimes I might drift, but how do I bring it back? And obviously today's session is about getting into in-depth of Workcover with that overview of what it is. So the next slide here, Colin,
Yep.
It is what is a Workcover. So a Workcover is part of it's part of an act. So people think it's not a made up word, or it's not a made up business there. It's a workplace injury rehabilitation compensation. It's part of an act.
Yep.
And what it sets out is that it's the return to work obligations as an employer.
Yep.
So we need to make sure that if there's an injured worker, what do we do? How do we help them?
Yep.
So it covers the workers' costs, whether it's from their injury because they're ill, and not just the injuries, if they've had a mental issue,
mental health issue, or an injury, a physical injury,
anything like that. So where the injured worker claims for compensation, so that is they have an injury, we'll go through that particular process, and then what do we do? The actual system is set up to be a no-fault scheme, so neither the employer is held liable or the employee. It's an injury that's happened, and that's obviously why we have insurances as businesses.
Yeah, and look, Workcover premiums, I can tell you, are rising. And I've got to tell you, us as a business, we're not in control of that, right? So that's Workcover in itself. But certainly, we're starting to see, the clients that we're close with, that we work with, starting to see that these premiums are really starting to increase now, which just sort of gives you a bit of an idea of what's happening. Yes. Yeah.
And so obviously it's available to full-time, part-time and casual workers. Yep. So we want to be mindful of that. I want to show some statistics here. So in 2020, so they haven't come up to date with 21 and 22, as obviously Workcover's got their own thing, but there's 37% of body stresses. So that might be whether they've pulled ligaments, muscles, and stuff like that. And then you've got the falls, trips and slips that are there. So quite interesting that it is more about how the body is occurring rather than, and it doesn't actually have to be a physical that you hurt yourself with a tool. It could be, I went to pick up something from the floor and I've pulled my back. So you've got your falls, trips and slips, which is sitting at 23%. What is being hurt by moving objects?
Yep. So, and look, and that's the bottom line. Like, that's what they've got Workcover for. So if someone actually injures themselves, then definitely, that's what it's there for, right? Yes. And if someone did injure themselves in the workplace, and it's happened at the workplace, then it should go through a Workcover claim. Well,
interesting enough, if you have a look about being by moving objects versus the vehicle collision, it's actually completely different. But one that is an important one that's raising is the mental stress claims that are coming through.
And that's another minefield in itself.
And obviously we talk about that through in psychosocial hazards, but you can see it's more about the actual physicality of the body rather than the
mental capacity.
That's right. So we'll go through more information about the workers' non-work related injury versus a work related injury. So if we go into the next slide, so we've got here, and I've got injuries and illnesses because in today's world we don't actually just have an injury, we might have that particular illness. But you've got here about slip, trips, falls and fractures. So that's your standard ones that we have. Where the muscular tension, tear and ligaments, obviously that also happens due to work, and you might have a wound, laceration or amputation depending on the situation, and burns. But psychosocial hazards, so that is now quite, and the mental health together in its own, it's more about, again, the mental capacity of that particular worker. It could be, and again, as I mentioned before, one of my, another webinar that we've got talks all about that. And essentially, it's, are they underworked, overworked? Do they have poor management? Do they have poor structure? So they've got all of a range of things that does cover that.
Do people scream and yell at them?
That's right.
So that's
pointing fingers and so forth. The other one is nervous system and sense organ disease. So actually, from the physicality and the capacity and the mentality perspective, it actually starts to affect the body and the nervous system. And at times people have digestive gut issues due to
Stress.
work. Yeah,
work
stress at work. In terms of non-work related, I've talked about, you know, we're the sports injuries, motorbike accidents, you know, all the going through all of those, whether it's happened in the general public, something's happened when you're at a pub or bar, you know, restaurant or something like that, parking lots, and again, non-work included mental health. So they could again be the cold and flu-like symptoms, pregnancy related financial stresses or other stresses outside.
So even with the non-work mental illness, that could be somebody who might be going through, I don't know, through some treatment of because they've been diagnosed with somebody or a divorce or a death or something like that. That's non-work related.
That's
correct?
Right. Yes, but it does start working into the work-related stresses because they play a factor together. So it could be something that's happened at home or their personal life. How do we then fix that or support that during the workplace? Yeah,
and I think, you know, that's where as a business owner, we've got to be very aware of our surroundings. Are you okay? You know, and just those check-ins, I think is really, really important. Very good, Maya. Okay, what's this about?
And I wanted to show more statistics because it is WorkSafe is quite a lot about showing you the detail rather than hearing about it. It's more about, again, 1 in 3 women versus 1 in 5 men have mental disorder claims. And then almost 20% of their workers say they've had sexual harassment or other type of harassment that actually contributes to work related stress. And then obviously from assault and threats has 22% of their workers. They all contribute to Workcover claims as well. Then they talked about being sworn and yelled at, as you gave that example, 37% have been there. And then unfair treatment due to their gender. So it's not just about a physical, as I mentioned, a physical injury. And then you can see the mental health stress claims. There is violence, there's aggression, there's everything have you into those particular claims, and they're just rising from now on.
And as we've spoken about in previous webinars we've done, you know, there's more change that's happened in this area in the last 12 months than what there has been the last 3 years put together.
Absolutely.
So we're just here to educate you. We're not here to scare everyone, but you just need to know it. And I think, you know, what's acceptable and what's not acceptable really is now something that needs to be brought into the workplace. And if you see things that are not right, then basically, you know, they need to be addressed. You know, don't let it ponder. You've got to make sure that it gets addressed. All right, very good, Maya. Okay.
And then I just want to show you another slide again, because it does, we tend to see that it does fall more into the mental health space in terms of the incapacities where, and again, psychosocial hazards do become probably one of the largest factors now coming into the actual injuries of claims. Whether it's before they've, whilst they commenced with you during their employment and even after they've actually finished employment. So there you can see there's had about 12,155 serious mental health claims that have come through Workcover and WorkSafe.
I'm watching the documentary of Beckham at the moment, and with what happened to him, like this was not even spoken about when he was a young player, but you know, he had crowds, you know, abusing him for 12 months playing games. And it's just not acceptable. And, you know, and we see it, you know, in workplaces, you know, when someone comes to us and there's a Workcover claim, you know, we can go in there and, you know, I'll tell you, there are some that have come through that, you know, it's actually happened. This has happened in the organisation. So we're going to go back and try and stop that from actually happening. And then, you know, obviously there is a small proportion where they'll just try and put it onto the owner as well, or onto the business to see what they can actually, you know, get away with. So how do we prevent these claims? You know, what are some of your tips that you've got here, Maya? And very good on topic 1. So what are some of your tips?
So whilst we're getting into the tips, we want to make sure that there's a positive duty. You as an employer and management have the positive duty requirements to educate and train your staff on standards, making sure that we've got a safe and inclusive and respectful workplace. I think that's the biggest one these days. I actually just finished off an interview with a prospective candidate for one of our clients, and he said, I've started 2 weeks in a new role and the culture there is the reason why I want to leave. and the processes that they don't have, they weren't on the same page.
Yep.
So that in itself is, you know, they didn't feel that it was somewhere that they could provide further information on or be a valued team member in.
Yep.
Consider obviously surveys, getting feedback from the team members. We want to do those to prevent the one-on-one check-ins with the staff. Also considering flexible workplace arrangements and rosters. So, you know, you might be, we're not just here for people that are in the office, but we, you know, people that are working long hours, your weekend workers, you've got to consider, okay, great employee that I've got, but can only work a certain amount of days.
And what's fair and reasonable too, you know,
Yes.
I think that's what's really important. And again, that's sitting back, you know, making sure that you're all over it. Yeah, I love people working 60 hours a week, but the reality is it's not sustainable. You can't do it. And, you know, you've got to give some time off. You've got to make sure that, you know, that the team is doing the job within the hours required. That's what we want to do. Yeah, and that's part of strategy. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's what the next point is, giving that work-life balance, right? So, you know, if they are working those 60 hours, what is the other components of it?
Yep.
A
half day off or lunch or something like that.
Consider, you know, whether they have RDOs, time off in lieu. How is that measured? How is that calculated? And then looking at the positive safety culture. So as much as there's culture, what is a safety culture? So looking at that from your health, your safety, the mental health, the well-being, and so forth. And educating the workers on how to handle queries, whether it's, you know, complaints, if they've got a grievance, what do we actually do and how do we actually communicate that? And also treating each other obviously with dignity and respect. And
positive duty, that's a legislation now.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
So it has to happen. And I think, you know, what happens sometimes is, and we see this, that a situation might happen in a workplace and you go on a scale of 1 to 10, you know, it's only a 2, so I won't do anything. Then you might get something that's a 5, it's on borderline. And, you know, you don't do it, and then it festers and all of a sudden becomes an 8 or a 9 and it becomes a massive problem for the business. But I just think that what's really important is, you know, you just constantly got your eyes and ears to the ground. You're constantly reinforcing your strategy of the business, what we're doing. You know, I've got a newsletter that's coming out in I think, Thursday this week. It's about the power of brainstorming, right, with your team. So that's a really good way of trying to create some positiveness. And so, you know, you need to be a good facilitator on how you actually do that. All right. So very good, Maya. So how do we prevent it?
So as we we're talking about from the start of the webinar, strategy is really important. So what is your plan? What is the business actually wanting to do? What's their goals for to achieve it over the next 12, 24 months? Is it realistic? You know, they actually play a massive part into reducing your Workcover claims. Even, you know, even your retention. There's so much with strategy that benefits you as an employer and as a business to ensure you've got the right steps in place to make it a safe and happy and workplace and culture. Then we talk about a formalized induction and onboarding process. So having that spelt out to the new worker, rather than them saying, oh, what do you do around here? And you say, oh, I'm actually not sure. Good question. We need to be on top of that. How do we give them that positive experience? Because they'll say, well, I wasn't shown how to do things properly. I wasn't inducted and onboarded. I didn't actually understand the company policies and processes. We want to give them a training and development opportunity. You know, what is part of their first 6 months of employment? Or, you know, what is your plan? What is your goals to actually understand that? And you're constantly talking. So I've got talking about communication and culture. Give them that two-way communication and get it back and understand if someone's saying, hey, Colin, this is my situation. How, you know, can you help? Not dismissing it from that particular perspective. Position description is actually one of the biggest one, and I've got one that actually happened. The staff member went to performance manage somebody and they said, oh, well, I don't have a clear position description. Ended up resigning from that particular company, but I'm just waiting for that particular claim to come through from that business to say, hey, well, you know, they did have a position description, they just weren't following it.
And we've gone into some clients where there's all these expectations, but nothing's documented. And that's just an ingredients for disaster coming. We can see that.
And you can see, again, another form of communication, having the performance discussions, the one-on-one. It's really having that openness with the staff members. The policies and systems and processes are also important. So, let's just say tripping hazards can actually happen on the work site that you're on. Actually, I had one where it had a snake bite into a client's premise, and it had all the actual signs that needed to have available to show, hey, snakes swing by here or slither by here. But essentially that particular person got bit, has now turned into a claim of that business. Now, what did the business need to do to minimize and mitigate that risk? So making sure that there's a process, if that does happen, we know what to do going forward. And then obviously doing risk assessments and managing those particular risks.
Just a couple of things, Maya. This is all about best practice.
Yes.
And there are companies out there we know don't see the value in HR. It's just PD, payroll, contracts and payroll, right? But, as we get further and further into more of this legislation, because when something goes wrong, what the insurance company wants or Workcover want is the history of the employee, all the details, all the records of, what their roles, responsibilities are, policies they've signed, and it becomes a bit of a nightmare if you don't have that in place. And that's why we're always about, putting in HR best practice.
That's right.
So building a respectful workplace culture. So if you want to take us through this, please.
So why is it actually as part of this today's session? Covers quite a lot of it. The right cultural fit or the right culture of the business talks about, it's not, you don't get in trouble because you logged in an incident.
No.
We want to talk about, okay, what is the process, and do the staff actually know what the process is? Where do they go? We use couple of wonderful HRIS systems that are there, and employees log in the incidences. The follow through that comes up with that, don't just dismiss it that it's an incident. What do we need to put in place for that? Provide training and resources, whether it's an additional, they've injured themselves temporarily or long term, what do we actually give them as that support mechanism? Speaking to someone or giving that support where available, say, hey, I've got a designated HSR available, do you want to speak to that person? Or they should have a good relationship with them already. Respond positively to that particular injury or the illness to reduce the concerns about lodging a claim. They're not nail biting, waiting to see what's happening. Have the power to promote and respect the workplace. So, hey, every staff member part of whether it's induction process, whether it's one of the team meetings that you have, all your toolboxes, saying let's be educated on what the health and safety requirements are from that perspective. Lead by example, no matter what position you are in, whether you're as a worker or you're a supervisor or a manager, have that right culture in place and celebrate and respect the differences. It might be that I have one arm today and unable to move that, but can I still do my job, or not criticize me because I've only got one available arm? Here I am doing one arm movement.
Or it's it's as simple as someone's wants to breastfeed or something like that. It's that respect. I think one of the things that if I quote my wife Lorraine, what she talks about is, I'm a dog groomer, and my passion is to go and groom dogs. But all this administration, HR stuff and IR stuff that I need to be aware of, I don't even know it or understand it. Why should I need to know it and understand it? That's a big thing. And that's where I guess, we like to be proactive and try and prevent things from happening, even though we do get, cases that come in where it's too late. But, we're all about the prevention, that proactiveness of making sure that you've got things in place. So it just minimises your risk. And what we do know from a fact is when you do have all this in place, you retain your employees.
That's right. And you can see it's not everything that we've shown you today and we've discussed has been more about, yes, what do we do if there's actually a Workcover claim? But how do we prevent it? All these slides through today are how would we make preventative measures in place? How do we actually, without even having to worry whether I'm going to get one or not? It's about understanding how, in this one I've got about making the workplace a bit healthier. It's not about whether it's the size of the person, it's more about what do I do mentally, physically, emotionally for my workers in this. So you've got encourage workers to speak up about their injury or illness. And if, we someone that, you know, was on medication, that used to be a thing on the past before. You weren't allowed, society thought that they couldn't talk about it, or they were degraded upon for having an illness. Whereas now it's actually, we encourage that conversation, obviously too with its limitations, but being able to say, hey, you know, it's okay. Open communication between each other. And obviously also not borderlining over that particular person's willing to share. Support the individual's impact regard to their injuries. Like I said, if they're only on one hand, can they continue to work? How do we proactively and support that person coming back into work with their duties as well? We can introduce healthy habits and be a proactive employer. Again, it's not about having an apple a day keeps the doctor away. It's again, what am I doing in my business to make it better? Yeah, becoming that employer of choice.
Yeah, very good.
Obviously making it smoke-free if you can, if there's any physical activities, team building exercise, and we're pretty big on these functions, activities, whatever we can do to support. And we've got here mental health initiatives. You know, we've got mental health days in play. We celebrate the Are You OK days. The big breakfast. So we look at other ways that we can support the team, and they do feel good about it.
I think the other thing too is like, you know, and I'm going to say it because, you know, like you're going to start to hear more of this coming through, women with menopause in the workplace, right? So, you know, as a male, I went and did a session, which was a big eye opener for me. But I think, you know, it's just having an understanding of, you know, how to make the, you know, your staff feel comfortable, you know, that are going through that, and, you know, not put that pressure on them. So everyone goes through ups and downs throughout their life, and I think a good employer, you just got to be there for them and help them through that mental capacity, that mental stress.
Yes.
And I've said it before, you know, in our business, you know, we've had trauma come through our business, and every business owner is going to have some sort of trauma. You know, we've had 2 women fall pregnant. 1 woman had a stillborn. We've had a guy who, you know, had a mild stroke, throat cancer, a divorce. All this happens, but that's all part of, you know, mental health, and it's about how you approach that particular person and support that person through the grief.
And then that does prevent that Workcover claim, or you know, it could be that they start slipping up with work, and they might, you know, they might be driving one of your company vehicles and they're not focusing, so they get into an accident. We had a guy that had heavy medication because he had an actual physical injury as part of his Workcover, but he wanted to come back to work so much that he even lied to the GPs that actually caused it wasn't a forklift, it was like a industrial truck to fall over, and he was in that vehicle. So you've got to be very mindful of the other factors around it, not the
and who would have been liable for that? So he would be liable because he's done the wrong thing, you know, going back to the employer.
But then the employer didn't do those check-ins and didn't do those, so they both have that, you know, obligation to ensure that they're opening honestly as well with each other.
That communication. I think that's the thing of today. Like, you really got to get to know your team. You know, like for me, it's very important that, you know, you get to know your team. You know, what's important to me is I know my staff members, you know, their partners' names, their kids' names. You know, I think that's really, really important. And just, you know, that's always that how's it all going? Okay, getting workers back to work. Yep.
Yeah, so consider those supports that they might need, the aids, the modification. So we're sitting on a sit-stand desk today, that, you know, you can convert that person might need regular standing up. The medicine balls, they might need an additional screen or a screen layer to protect them. Whether I'm out on the job, you know, is it a job that I can do with physical labor? Within that physical labor, I might not be able to do all my duties, but what do we do from a reasonable perspective to say, okay, well, I can't give you used to carry 30 kilos, I can only give you up to 5 kilos. And even that might be a struggle. Or you might find other modified duties, putting the plan and goals for that person's return to work. I had someone fall from playing soccer with one of their residents, and the grass was wet, they fell back, they injured their wrist. They can still go on completely with their normal duties because they don't have to use them for any other tasks. So we were able to get them back to return to work. But they're the conversations that helped us to get there. So you can see from the plan and the goals, work with the emotions. And again, you can see we're going back into that psychosocial space, that emotions into giving them meaningful work and activities. Now, again, if I'm someone that's physical all the time and I'm out on site or I'm out on the shop floor, but then I've got limited capacity and I need to sit, am I still having that interactions with the customers? Am I still having to do those meaningful work that I was, happy to do, but maybe with some limitations, because that does really affect how they feel and how they continue on in the business. Liaise with doctors if we need to get further information. What other modifications do we need? Give them other options, as I said here, assess the purpose, the positions, and the policies and the processes that we have in place.
And the thing I love about you doing this, because you have this passion, like I talk about the dog groomer, right?
Yes.
So the person grooming the dog, and they got the passion to make, that little pooch look absolutely fantastic, and you have this passion. So if you are going through this any type of concerns around Workcover, we encourage you to contact us at 1300 for advice, because a little bit of advice up front might just prevent a big mistake you might make later down the track.
Yes.
Okay.
And a simple, I've said there, have you actually displayed the "Are you injured" poster? Do you know where to get it?
Yeah.
They're the things that, you can have WorkSafe knock on your door and they don't say an "Are you injured" poster, and they say, okay, what's your process? That's a good question. So making sure that we have, depending on the supplier that you've got, there's got standard ones. We can help you with finding those for your business as well. So it is an actual requirement under the Act to display that poster.
It is, yep. Very good. All right. So our third and last topic is, what should you do when you receive a Workcover claim? So so thanks if you can give us your tips, Maya.
Yes.
Fantastic.
Yep. As an obligation, we've got to make sure once we've received the initial certificate, we need to get a certificate of capacity. So that could be for up to 52 weeks, but essentially the first certificate of capacity generally sits about the 2 to 4 weeks of a certificate, but we need to actually, once receive it, do something about it. We don't keep it at our desk where it sometimes sits for some time because they don't know what to do with it. Make sure we've obviously followed the right work safe requirements, promote a health and safe work environment, but we also want to, if they're injured, provide the appropriate support and assistance. So is it a temporary fix that can continue working from that injury on that day? Or do they have to go home? Do I have to organise a taxi to get them to somewhere, or do I need to organise an ambulance depending on the severity of it? It's your duty as an employer to provide suitable employment to that employee, whether it's got no capacity or obviously they won't be able to work, but if they've got suitable duties, what are actually suitable? And then what are considered as alternatives? So there's got variations to that. Risk assessments. Now, you've heard me say that a couple of times. Risk assessment is also looking at the situation. Do I have cords hanging out of under the desk? Do I have the right tools and equipment? I might have a drill that I'm using, but the drill head might be worn out. Those particular things, are we actually signing them off as done? Opportunities to return to work safely. So if we don't have anything, not forcing them to come back where it might create more risk for them. And then keeping the injured worker in the position actually legally has to be open. So they're important obligations for you to know during their time on that Workcover claim. In my next slide,
which we'll get to in a sec.
Yes.
But sometimes what happens is, when a Workcover claim comes in, pardon me, and the owner of the business is really pissed off, right? Yes. How dare they do that to me? This is not right. This is not fair. And it comes back to that due diligence, doesn't it? Yep.
Yes. So the process itself. So obviously they submit a claim. Now, depending on the state and territory you're in, they might have to complete the form online versus a physical copy of that document.
Yep.
So they put in a claim. It's our requirement within that first 10 days that we actually provide that response, whether it's an online completion or submission or it's on paper base, and then we need to work it through to the Workcover agent. So for example, we've got in Victoria, we've got Allianz, we've got Exchanging, there's quite a number of other ones that are out there, Gallagher Bassett and so forth, or you've got your broker that's helping you through this, but understanding that you need to do that pretty much straight away.
Yep.
And what I don't have in here is reportable incidences, and they have to urgently being notified to your WorkSafe provider. Then basically the submission will go through, you'll get a preliminary case number during that particular time. The Workcover agent will review the claim, whether it's going to be accepted or rejected, and as an employer, you've got that opportunity to reject or accept it. But again, it's not about what they've done to you or what they've done during your workplace. It's sometimes, something so preventative or something that couldn't be prevented, and that happens. Then the Workcover agent will look at a POE, so that's based on their earnings, and we talked about this morning in our team meeting about understanding it's not just your business, and again, depending on the state and territory that you're in, it might be just for that particular business, or if I have 2 or 3 jobs on the side, those particular earnings can also be calculated in there.
And look, what sometimes happens is, that anger management comes, right? So the anger comes from the owner. I know because I get the calls, right? When it does happen, like, if the doctor's wrong or the assessor's wrong, you just can't challenge that. It's almost impossible, isn't it?
That's right. And because the doctor is a legal representative in terms of the health profession, that they are what stands.
Yeah.
I just want to also touch on, so there is the first 13 weeks versus the further 13 weeks. The first 13 weeks are capped at the 95% of the person's work.
Yep.
And then the actual, after that 13 weeks, the 80% of the pre-injury earnings come into. And the questions always get asked, do I make up that pay? And what do I legally have to? And really, again, depending on state and territories, you don't always have that obligation to pay that rest of the amounts.
And that's where you come into it. We do a lot of, when people ring us and ask us, that's what we're encouraging. That's why we're doing these free webinars, is to educate you. You don't have to be the expert. But, if you're concerned or something's happened, then, we're encouraging you to contact us before something goes wrong, if that makes sense. And if something's gone wrong, we still encourage you to contact us. We'll do our very best to get you out of the situation and help manage the situation. Yeah,
that's right. So I want to also show you what Workcover costs actually can include. So it is, as we mentioned, the loss of income, which can be the percentages, but it's also the medical and the rehabilitation treatment. So as an employer, you've got the first 10 days that you need to pay for based on their particular wages. And again, how do you calculate that for a casual versus a part-time person? There is ways, if it's a regular and systematic casual, that'll be a little bit easier to determine. But also, if it's a genuine casual, we'll have to give an average and indication. But that rehabilitation cost could be that they've gone to see the doctor, they've got whether it's medication or anything like that. Mental health. Yeah. So all of those up to a certain amount for that first the employer liability. They might have other legal costs that come associated with it. And again, at the end of it, so if it's a person that's been on long-term work cover, what's the lump sum compensation that's going to come through it? And they actually start to affect your premiums rather than you having to pay for that. And they're generally paid whether it's to help the person come back to work or if it's with their pre-injury duties as well.
Yeah, and then when it comes back to recruiting, how many times do we find people put somebody on and they don't go and do any type of due diligence or any type of checks to find out? And then something happens from a pre-injury or pre-employer and it's brought into the workplace, and then how do we deal with that? We get those phone calls.
That's right, yes.
Yeah. Okay.
So just wanted to put in a reminder out there. So your role is to help the workers. So not just the owner, the manager also involved as well, to make sure that the workers stay at work or get back to work in a safe manner. And you can see here, where possible, back to pre-injury duties. They might actually never come back to pre-injury duties, but what are we doing to help them get there? We've also got lead by example. Again, don't put workers into situations that you wouldn't do. I think you and I both know where we've had someone create a pothole and getting the workers to fit into that particular hole.
Yeah.
And and they wouldn't do it themselves. I'm baffled that it never became a Workcover claim, but essentially there are those things that we as business owners and managers do get away with, but understanding you got to do what you're going to, if you're going to lead by example, if you're going to do it and you expect the worker to do it and it's safe to do so, that works. But if it's not, we wouldn't encourage it. Not all one size fits all. So we're talking about one person's particular situation. is not exactly the same as the next person's one.
Yep.
So as I said, something as simple as I had someone pick up something in a very tight, narrow space. Now, rather than moving the equipment, that person got an injury. And, you know, would that have been someone that was 20 years younger? Maybe we wouldn't have the same outcome as that. So everyone is different. So we also want to make sure that we look after no difference between age brackets.
Well, as a professional business, you don't want people to have an accident. That's the bottom line.
Right,
Yeah,
exactly.
you don't want it. It's like we have car insurance, and you know, and if we have an accident, we know it gets repaired. And one of the reasons why we've got, you know, WorkSafe or Workcover is to try and minimise that. So in the event, and you know, and touch wood, it hasn't happened, but it will happen because we know it's going to happen. You know, things do happen. We had a doctor once come into the medical for our staff and fell down the stairs and broke his leg at our office here. That's just one of those. Crazy. That was crazy, right? But it's just one of those things that happens. Okay. Yep.
As I said, one of them throughout this session today has been about culture and support. How do we give them that guidance that they need to have a positive experience at work, rather than a negative one that may result to some claims coming through.
Yep.
And then consider the availability and suitability of the light duties of the worker. So as I mentioned, the suitable duties versus alternative duties are actually two different things for a worker. So can we give them any of those to aid their return to work?
And I just want to, you know, to say, like, you know, from a physical point of view, you know, get rid of the hazards, right? Get the safety gear if they need to have safety gear. You know, you've got to get all the you know, you got to make sure you provide your staff with
right PPE.
Right PPE gear and stuff like that. And I know we have a franchisee on this hookup from Hip Pocket Workwear and Safety. So go and speak to you know, one of them, one of those franchises, and get all your safety gear. So that's just from a physical point of view. But from a mental point of view, that's around behaviour, and that's about understanding why do people behave the way they do, and that might come into doing things like personality profiling and, you know, other things you need to do to try and, you know, create that great workplace.
Yes.
Well, I always go back to what is your strategy to grow? What's your strategic intent? How do your team form part of that? So, you know, when you're going in the right direction, they understand it and they embrace it and they're with you. Because when you have fighting in the workplace, you know, arguments and fighting and swearing and abusive of people, right? Being abusive towards people, that is what WorkSafe want to stop. So you can have some fun and banter in the business and have a few laughs, and that's what it's about. But, you know, we're just going to make sure that we've got that great workplace. You've done an amazing job as always, Maya. You're my rock. Wouldn't be able to do this without you. But do we have any questions? Do you want to put some questions in the chat box? You know, feel free to ask us any questions, because we certainly come across, you know, lots of different situations. And, you know, if I say, you know, like, we're just trying to prevent it. Small business don't have the big budgets for the big lawyers, big law firms, you know. So you know, for us, it's about how do you prevent it. And, you know, if you get the culture right and the direction right, a lot of this goes away, I feel. But you know, you just want to make sure you're there for your well-being. So no, we've got some thank yous that are in the chat. But okay, well, I'll take it we don't have any questions, which is really good. Great webinar, and we're here to take your calls if you need anything. But we've also got a couple of free downloads you might be interested in. So like 12 steps to a business plan or 10 steps to change management, because, you know, when it comes to the mental stress, if we want to create change within our business, well, people don't like change. So there's a process on what you need to do to actually make that happen. So so feel free to do any, and we've got a variety of downloads on our website, free downloads. And our next webinar is how to build a better business strategy. So that sort of carries on from this, because if I've got some methods in place that I'm, you know, plan to grow our business, then, you know, that gets we know that gets rid of noise. Celebrating the wins, setting the goals, objectives, celebrating the wins, the milestone moments, keeping it positive. And I just think, you know, you spend a third of your life at work, you want to make sure it's fulfilling and really good. So thank you, May. You've done an amazing job as always, like the rest of the team. And yeah, these are our services. They're on our website. And if you really enjoyed what you went through today, you know, we live by our Google reviews. We give free information out. And we're just trying to do our best to educate small business owners mainly, any business owner, but small business owners who just don't, understand this. So we just want to try and help you out there. So we hope you really enjoyed today's session. Thank you very much for our webinar.
Thank you.
This has been recorded, so for those who are not on the hookup today, they'll receive automatically a copy of the webinar. And for those who want to see this for a second time or show somebody else, this within 48 hours, a copy of this webinar will be up on our website, so you can refer to it there. So thank you very much, everyone, and that concludes the webinar for today. So good job, Maya. Thank you.
Bye.